So we've already taken a look at Cruis'n USA and Cruis'n World, two arcade ports to the N64 which were panned by critics, loved by some gamers, and still managed to sell well enough for Midway to make the third instalment of the Cruis'n franchise. This time up we have the difficult final part of the N64 Cruis'n trilogy. Like in movies, the third instalment is always tricky and is often one of the weakest parts. Just look at trilogies such as The Godfather and The Matrix to know that it's difficult to please fans of the previous instalments and still attract new people to the game. In the case of Cruis'n Exotica, the year 2000 release by Midway, they decided to tweak the game rather than reinvent the franchise. By this point, Midway must have known that they were never going to please the media with another Cruis'n game, and so they instead set about tweaking parts of the game to please the gamers who would actually be buying the game. As expected, this was yet another Cruis'n game which was slated by the press. Just look at the reviews on websites like IGN to know that they really didn't care for this instalment. Also, strangely enough, this was only released in North America, so perhaps even gamers here in Europe and Asia were already tired of the series. But enough of the history of the game, let's dive in and see what Cruis'n Exotica brings to the table. Starting off with the graphics. Like in the previous two games, the pop-up is still some of the worst seen on the console. Midway did make some improvements, however as the graphics do look a little sharper, anyone expecting high-res graphics will be sadly disappointed. It's a strange decision that Midway didn't add the expansion pack support for this game, considering almost every N64 owner would have had one by this point, although it does have rumble pack support for some added feedback whilst you're playing. Midway did however work on the frame rate of the game, so it runs at a smooth 30 frames per second, and to be honest it rarely slows down, even when there are multiple cars on the screen. Also, the frame rate runs very well in multiplayer, and you can play this in up to 4 players for some short periods of fun. Speaking of game modes, there are 3 solo player modes. Firstly, you have Cruis'n Exotica mode, which is your bog standard arcade experience. There is also Cruis'n Challenge, which is set around time trials and drag races, and there's also Cruis'n Freestyle, which is basically a practice mode. There are 12 new tracks, and there are a total of 48 variations, so at least having multiple routes to play through adds a little longevity to the game. You also have the option to choose from 6 drivers, although it doesn't seem to alter the gameplay experience all that much. You may be wondering where the game gets its name from. After all, Cruis'n USA was American tracks, Cruis'n World was worldwide tracks, and so for this game they chose exotic locations from across the globe, including courses set in Atlantis, Las Vegas, Mars and the Amazon. A nice touch in the game was that you would unlock secrets the more miles you racked up. The onboard cart has onboard saves, so you can play the game and the more you'll unlock. There are plenty of cars to unlock and they are as bizarre and unique as they have been in the 2 previous Cruis'n games. The course design should also get a special mention. While the Cruis'n series has always had below par graphics, they have always had great track scenery in my opinion, and each of the courses has a unique look and feel to it. Each track you play will feel quite similar as it's straightforward racer, but at least you'll have something nice to look at whilst you're racing. The controls in the game are more or less identical to the previous games. A button to accelerate, a button to brake, and then the analog stick to dodge traffic. It's as simple as that really, and none of the cars feel much different from one another. If you double tap the accelerate button, you will boost, and this gives you a more or less endless supply of boosting. On top of that, if you boost into the back of your opponent, you'll perform a super flip and actually get an extra second added to your time limit. This pretty much sums up the wacky arcade experience you'll get in Cruis'n Exotica. It doesn't try to be serious and delivers what it says it will, a pure arcade racing experience. The sound in the game is again quite good. Some of the tunes are catchy, and whilst I wouldn't consider it some of the best on the system, I will say that I enjoyed it. There is also a nice mix, and so you can change tracks to have a song that you like whilst you're playing. The sound effects seem to have taken a backward step in this version however. The engine noises are very weak and timid. In my opinion, if you're driving a muscle car it should sound like it. There are the standard smash noises if you hit other cars or scenery, but you'll hardly notice it unless you're really paying attention. I have no childhood memories of playing Cruis'n Exotica, considering it was never released here in the UK, so this review is a little bit of a strange one for me to do. On the one hand, I like the rest of the series and I find the game to be a fun, no-nonsense arcade racer. It's not the kind of game you'll be playing for months trying to shave seconds off your lap time or playing with your friends, but it does have a certain nostalgic feel to it, the kind of game developers just don't seem to be making anymore. Cruis'n Exotica and the rest of the Cruis'n trilogy take me back to a time when I'd play a game just for the fun of it and not spending hours mastering controls or perfecting race lines. Yes, the graphics are poor, and there have always been better racing games on the N64, and the Cruis'n trilogy is definitely not for everybody, but heck, I love playing these crappy arcade races and I just love it. So, how do you remember Cruis'n Exotica or the rest of the trilogy as a whole? Did you rent this rather than buy it, or did you just have to buy it after having loved the previous two games? Let me know in the comments below, and if you've got a suggestion for my next review, let me know. Until next time, thanks for watching.